Raspberry beer. The kind you find at a second-hand store. Raspberry beer. When it was drunk, she couldn't drink it anymore.
Stop doing that.
It's pretty impressive, actually. Congratulations, James. This is the new podcast.
That's the new theme.
Yeah, no, this is just the new podcast. We see how long James can do
How
that.
long can James go without passing out?
I got told we needed a new theme tune because the other one was boring because people don't understand what a theme tune is.
I'm not talking about anything but ichthyosaurs.
You do know he will climb out of his grave and beat you to death.
Wait, what? Who was that supposed to be?
Macho madness.
Someone do a Slim Jim!
I don't know who that was.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
He's dead?
He died like
dead.
James's birthday is the anniversary of his death.
I killed.
Wait, when did he die?
Like
2
5
years
years
ago.
ago.
He stopped
oh, okay.
the rapture,
What?
Amanda. He died.
But he went out in style. He had a heart attack and careened off a freeway.
Yeah.
I'm legitimately depressed now.
So here's the thing. In order to survive on my birthday, someone famous dies. I killed Stephen J. Gould and I killed Randy Savage. They're part of me now. I have their power.
No, James. Macho Man, he died to stop the rapture.
Hi guys, and welcome to Paleo After Dark. Today, hi. Hi guys, welcome to Paleo After Dark. Today we're going to be... No, that's a rubbish intro.
Fourth round's the try, James.
Hey guys,
Fourth round's the charm, James.
for fuck's sake.
Fifth, sixth.
Hey guys, welcome to Paleo
Hey guys,
No, that's not your job.
No, let's do it all at once. Everyone at once.
Hey guys, welcome to
Paleo
After
Dark.
No,
That is just going to be a fuzzy mess. James, why don't you do this?
okay. Hey guys, welcome to Paleo After Dark. I really don't have anything to say. I mean, today we've got some interesting things to talk about. We're talking about fish lizards.
Fish lizards, yeah, little dolphin-y lizard thingies.
Ichthyosaurs.
They're cool.
Fish lizards.
Pretty awesome.
And so we've got the standard blurb. We're all stationed at the University of Kansas, but the University of Kansas doesn't really know what we're doing, so it's...
Each time you do this, you come up with new and interesting ways to, like, reestablish this whole
I know, because it's
disclaimer.
really boring saying the same thing.
You don't have to. I think by this point the disclaimer stands.
I'm pretty sure we should say it every time.
Okay, just in case.
We're going to swear.
Yeah, that's
so
Fucker.
could fuck's sake, Randall. Fuck's sake, James. God damn it.
Jesus Christ, you pieces of shit. What the fuck is wrong with you?
And well, it's okay as long as we don't say we're fine.
Oh, good.
It's okay. Curtis can bleep it.
No, I do not have that technology.
We can. Well, we'll do something. And
Damn it, we are so fucked.
and there's something else that goes with that. Oh, fact checking. We don't.
Checking, we don't.
Well, shit, fuck.
Cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits. Come on, let's just do all of this.
Do you know what? I'm not entirely sure that today's going to work.
No, today's gonna be fucking great.
Well, I was going to announce this all on Twitter, but if this is what this one's going to be like, I'll maybe wait, a week or two.
Just let the seas calm down.
Yeah.
We'll start back with something a little bit more. I'm not gonna say professional because really, let's be honest, we never do that.
No.
But
There was something I had meant to say this time, but I can't remember what it was. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe there was, but it's something I've forgotten.
I don't know. It's pleasant and warm outside and delightfully sunny, and there's
Unless
birds.
it's next week, in which case it's bloody hot and miserable.
Unless
Yeah.
unless it's
Unless
not.
this is the day that it goes up.
This is the day that it goes up.
There was something.
Fuck up, bird.
They were here before you, evolutionarily speaking.
I don't. Evolutionarily speaking.
But we
Damn.
already talked about that.
Huh?
We already talked about that.
Yeah, we did talk about that. That was last
That
two
was
weeks podcast.
That was 2 weeks ago, yeah.
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 Yeah, that was. What was
You'll think of it later.
It's okay, James. It's gonna be okay.
I had a really good.
We're gonna be
intro.
like halfway through the podcast, and you're suddenly gonna yell, "Oh my god, I forgot to say!"
Oh no, that's it. Okay. The reason why we should do the disclaimer every time is because it's pointed out to me that because we have stable, permanent URLs for all our podcasts, we can technically be cited.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Do not do that.
Yeah,
For
don't-
the love of God, do not do
don't
that.
cite
Please,
us.
for the love of God and everything that anyone would ever hold holy, don't.
In which case, remember that you want to list it alphabetically by first names when it comes to authors.
Fuck you, James.
Hey, yay.
Wait,
Middle
you're
of-
first author.
Yeah. That means I get...
No.
It's all an et al. At that point.
No, by first names.
Oh, first names.
Yeah.
Oh, Amanda.
Oh, fuck you. No, it never goes by first name.
Like this time.
No.
You just need to put the. Wow.
No. Meh.
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 Nya, nya.
Okay.
Meh.
Okay. Well.
Anyway, fish lizards.
Fish lizards.
I'm very
I
excited.
feel like ichthyosaurs are one of those things that hasn't been like butchered by 90s cartoons. Like everything else when they were trying to do anthropomorphize something. Like we
Well,
talked
we-
about the space ducks
We
last
had
week.
sewer sharks.
We had sewer
That's
sharks.
pretty
Like
much the
sewer
same
sharks,
thing.
yeah.
you had,
Sharks.
you
Yeah,
had Ninja
street
Turtles.
sharks. Yeah, it was street sharks. Not
You had
sewer
dinosaurs because there was like Denver the
Extreme
Last
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaur and
And
Extreme
Dinosaur.
Dinosaurs and shit like that. But
Yeah.
we
I
didn't
love
have-
Denver the Last Dinosaur.
Yeah, I just remember the Denver the Last Dinosaur.
Is that why you
Oh
wanted
my
to learn to play
God.
guitar?
Oh, Dinosaurus.
What would you say, James?
Is that why you wanted to learn to play guitar so you can be in Denver's band?
No. Although it really is kind of funny when I think about it now that Denver is basically just a jabberjaw, but dinosaurs.
And it's also, I mean, did he show you a world that you'd never saw before?
Yes. Yes. Denver touched me in a very inappropriate
Curtis, show
place.
us on the doll where Denver
What I really
touched
like
you.
is the fact that he takes you back in time with a lump of tar when there are no tar pit dinosaurs, and then shows you mammoths.
Yeah, you know, because
With-
it's
with
factually
T-Rexes
accurate.
and
It's
stuff like-
Nickelodeon and shit.
I mean, I think he's a Corythosaurus that got its neck stuck between a tree at some point. I think that's what the species of dinosaur Denver is.
Okay, so he's
That
just been
makes
horribly deformed.
That
due
or
to-
it's an undescribed therizinosaur because it's got a really bad, really fat
It doesn't have
belly.
the really long claws.
Some
a kid's show.
therizinosaurs didn't, though. The more
okay.
primitive ones, if I recall correctly, the more primitive ones didn't have.
Well, Segnosaurus, they used to think, which is that Segnosaur is actually they shouldn't be called therizinosaurs. They should be called Segnosaurs because Segnosaurus was its own family way
That's
before
true.
therizinosaurs were
That's
described.
true. But yeah, Segnosaurus didn't have like the bizarrely, almost
No,
grossly long claws.
not-
but
not
it had
the really
huge,
long
It had
ones.
huge arms. Is
Yeah,
what
but
it had.
it did have long, thick claws, and they thought that it might have used them to dig into termites because they similarized compared it to an aardvark.
Some of them, however, are at least from the tooth dentition thought to be herbivores.
Yes.
Which would at least explain why Denver doesn't eviscerate and then eat all the kids that he brings back with him.
That's true.
That's happens after the credits.
Oh, that's at the end of the credits that Denver just kills everyone.
fair-
Either
Yeah.
that
That's
or
showing a world that you never saw before. He just brings you to your maker.
either that or Denver the dinosaur is before the fall of Eden.
Oh, okay.
Well,
okay.
you mean back when Tyrannosaurus used its teeth to crack open coconut?
Yes, exactly.
Are you pulling out some creationist
What?
website?
Yes, not even kidding. Not
okay.
even kidding.
Do you
That's
know-
the
do you know-
explanation.
Do you know what Parasaurolophus's head crest was for? It used it to breathe. It basically was a ventilation chamber so it could breathe fire. That's why dragons in mythology breathe
Pompadour,
fire.
Elvis.
You mean Corythosaurus?
So where are you getting all this
Lambosaurus.
lovely information? That
Well, Amanda's
Mine is, I think, from
childhood.
I think mine
Amanda's
is.
childhood.
I think mine's from either Answers in Genesis or, I mean, if you go to any of the big creationist museums, they literally have people riding around on dinosaurs and are like,
They do.
before the fall of Eden, before the fall of man,
before Gary the Unicorn died.
Before time began.
before original sin, everything was herbivorous, and there were no predators, and
So
dinosaurs.
lions just ate tofu.
Yeah,
Okay,
Actually,
Wait, so lions invented tofu?
of course.
that makes
That's
a
what they
lot
had
of
to
sense.
eat.
Actually,
They ate a whole bunch of tofurkeys and tofibras and
I'll go with the Simpsons here, and you just, pull off the slab of bacon from the pig.
oh yeah, that works too.
what about chicken bacon?
Chicken's still an animal.
Well, and,
You just pull off the slab of bacon from the chicken?
No, it's 3/5 of an animal. So I've
But you
noticed.
know,
Shame
they
him.
never talk about
Shame
ichthyosaurs.
him now.
No, they don't, and neither do we, it seems. Because I've noticed we do tend to talk about the Bible a lot when we're just left to our own devices.
fish
Saddle
don't count as
Nazis.
meat.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
True.
Fish don't count as
Fish
meat.
are not meat.
It's true, and if we're going by the Victorian definition of fish, like a whale is a fish because it's in the water.
If we're going by the scientific definition of fish, a person is a fish.
Well, to be fair, the scientific definition of fish, we are all fish. Fish
Yes.
is a meaningless group.
Which means that you could eat people during Lent.
You could eat
know,
eat pork
that's how-
during Lent.
Do you know how Jesus fed the 5,000? 10,000
Fed
people
to 'em.
came to Jesus and said, Jesus, we're hungry. And Jesus turned around and goes, don't worry, I've got this. And that's how Jesus fed the 5,000. Well,
So how quickly to cannibalism was that one, James?
I don't know, but that technically wasn't... Oh, no, it was me. I did bring up the fish connection.
It is-
Talking of fish, lizards.
Fish lizards.
Fish lizards. What are ichthyosaurs?
Okay, out of curiosity, you just woke up in the middle of the night, like sudden fever sweat dream. Was this like Salieri moment in like
I
you
mean,
were just
this is in the midst of a series of very weird dreams I've been having of late.
okay?
So,
Driven completely mad in your chamber, wondering what the fuck you're going to do.
no, I just come up with songs
Okay,
sometimes.
okay.
What are ichthyosaurs, Amanda?
What are ichthyosaurs?
What are
Amanda?
ichthyosaurs?
So
Miss-
ichthyosaurs. Great. This is great. Apparently, I need more beer.
Of course, you need more beer, Amanda.
You always
So-
need more beer.
Ichthyosaurs are a group of aquatic marine reptiles which are not related to the other groups of aquatic marine Mesozoic reptiles.
You mean like the mosasaurs?
The
or the
mosasaurs,
plesiosaurs?
Which
the
are varanids.
plesiosaurs. Yes, the mosasaurs are varanid lizards. They're more closely related to
Snakes.
things like
Snakes,
monitor lizards, things like that. Plesiosaurs are a really wonky group
Yeah.
that I don't think anybody's still really 100% sure where they belong. They have their own bizarre skull
Well, there's like
morphology.
plesiosaurs and then pliosaurs, depending on whether or not they're long neck or
Placodops.
short neck. and
They're all
placodops.
plesiosaurs, but they're essentially long neck versus short neck plesiosaurs, and pliosaurs are the short neck plesiosaurs.
Are those actually a monophyletic group, or are they just?
I believe they
arbitrarily
are.
defined?
Yes, I
They're,
believe they
they're
are.
real. I think they're real.
I'm pretty sure they're real. Well, Plesiosauria as a whole is definitely a real group.
Yeah, of course. It's weird.
Weird.
I mean, Nessie, basically, if anyone wants an interpretive
Yeah.
image of what it would be.
Well, and their skull morphology is very bizarre. They are the only other group that has only one hole in the skull, and it's different than us. Mammals are the other group, but mammals have what are called synapsid skulls, which means they only ever had one hole. It's the temporal hole. That's why if someone punches you in the temple, you die, because that's a zone of weakness. It's essentially a hole in your skull.
Please don't punch people in the skull.
Yeah, don't do that.
We do not condone the punching of people
people-
in the skulls.
yes.
Although baby skulls are pretty flexible.
James, we do not condone punching babies.
But we do condone the eating of babies.
James and Randall can condone whatever they want to do with
not
babies, but
condoning
we're
it.
not.
Curtis and Amanda do not.
I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying it's an interesting scientific point.
So
Let's talk about the
Most-
holes in skulls that aren't
exactly.
used to punch people.
So most other animals, very primitive tetrapods, so amphibians and early reptiles, had no holes in the skull. They were called anapsid. Then you get a very basal split between the synapsids, things that are more closely related to mammals, and what are called the diapsids, which are things with two what are called temporal fenestrae, the holes in the skull. It's for muscle attachment. And there's some argument over whether turtles, which are anaspids, so they don't have any holes, whether they're really anapsids or whether they lost both the temporal
Probably
fenestrae.
secondarily
They're
fused.
pretty sure they're
It's
secondarily
it's a
fused.
secondary fuse.
Yeah, but
The question
it's-
is it a secondary fusion of one or two? That's the question
exactly.
these days.
And so the plesiosaurs are what's called euryapsid, and they're left with the upper temporal hole. They've lost the second one, but they were originally diapsid. So that's kind of why plesiosaurs are really bizarre, but ichthyosaurs are not closely related to them at all.
No, they're a completely distinct, separate thing that really does look like a dolphin or maybe even a swordfish at times.
They look they're
They have a very fish-like look to them.
Toniform ichthyosaurs do.
True,
It's-
right.
But
There isn't.
the early Triassic ones looked more like, actually kind of more like mosasaurs, but where
Yes.
the body was less well defined, they look more like moray eels.
Well, here's the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Here's the big difference between ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs, and you see this right off the bat. And it's the same thing with the difference between plesiosaurs and mosasaurs. Ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs both have, and mosasaurs have this to a much, much, much lesser extent. It's something called hyperphalangy. And hyperphalangy is where you start adding on bones in the fingers.
Yeah, phalange just is phalanx. They're the bones that are on the fingers.
Yes, or the toes.
Yeah.
And generally the primitive formula is, I think, 2, 3, 3, 3.
I think you're right.
Because we have that. We have a primitive tetrapod hand, essentially. 5 fingers, 2 in the thumb, 2 phalanges, 2 bones in the thumb, 3 in the other 4 fingers.
God damn it! Stop. No,
Shut the fuck
no
up,
shocker
James.
jokes, James. No shocker jokes.
You have to say 2 in there.
We're going to ignore James and continue on. Now, what plesiosaurs do
That's all I can think about.
and ichthyosaurs is they continually
They just make a paddle. Of
Yeah,
phalanges.
essentially
Yeah.
they keep adding phalanges until they get this big paddle-like shape. And mosasaurs don't really do that. They add phalanges, but it's to a much lesser extent. And really, they elongate the phalanges more than they
Yeah,
add.
they're
Yes.
really, really long when you're looking at them.
And the reason for this is that plesiosaurs, and especially ichthyosaurs, are using their fins, less so in ichthyosaurs, sorry, especially in plesiosaurs, less so in ichthyosaurs. Plesiosaurs especially are using their fins for propulsion.
Yeah.
Whereas-
they're making big flippers.
Yes. Whereas ichthyosaurs are doing this to a much lesser extent. They are more tail propulsion, and we'll talk about why that is. But mosasaurs are strictly tail-driven propulsion. They've got this big tail with these huge hemal and neural arches, so big spines coming off the vertebra in the tail, and that is essentially just a giant...
I mean, you see a full skeleton of a mosasaur, and it almost looks like a water moccasin that you just added a body to.
Here's the really cool
Like a-
thing.
limbs.
Yeah.
Mesozoic marine crocodiles very heavily converged upon the mosasaur body form.
Oh,
yes.
Very heavily.
Yes. I mentioned that ichthyosaurs are primarily tail-driven, despite the fact that they have this hyperphalangeal fin. It is essentially a fin. When you find an ichthyosaur skeleton, and this was, when they first started finding them, they noticed that you always got a downward kink in the tail at the very end. It's the last 20 vertebrae or so? 15,
Not
20?
familiar.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
That sounds about right.
It varies. But...
it varies. But, and they couldn't, at first they couldn't really figure out what that was. They thought, is it a rigor mortis kind of thing? Is it some sort of preservation thing? And then they realized, no, it had a fluked tail, just like a fish. So it was more fish-like than any of the other Mesozoic marine reptiles.
Here's the really cool thing about the functional morphology of that. And it's interesting, when you look at the evolution of ichthyosaur swimming, in some ways it parallels the evolution of swimming in sharks. Early sharks have very sinusoidal body movements, so they use the entire body from the forelimbs back. And
All
they just,
fish have that.
Yeah, they just wriggle it, and that generates propulsion, but they're very slow, they will go at a very constant speed. When you evolve what's termed the tuniform body type, so this is basically a body form that looks much like a tuna, that allows you to get bursts of speed and to do very sudden shifts in where you're going. Interestingly enough, this sort of life habit is linked to the evolution of warm-bloodedness. So tuniform sharks are warm-blooded, although facultatively they sort of dupe it. Their metabolism makes them warm-blooded as long as they stay active.
They're endothermic, but it's sort of there's a special word for what sharks are, and I cannot for the life
So
of
Don't-
me.
it's
when
always-
they're moving, they're actually generating heat.
Yeah.
They're keeping it. But
Yeah.
they're not like they're just constantly generating
Yeah.
Is
heat.
it facultative endothermy?
Could be, it fits.
Possibly.
I don't know.
Can't remember. I know I learned about it in Animal Phys, but that was Jesus. That was like 7 years ago. So
The only quasi like endothermy that I remember is like the hydrostatic, where you're just big enough to maintain.
giganticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gigantism.
There's different kinds of endothermy that sort of verge on poikilothermy.
By the way, endothermy means you generate
Warm
your own
blood,
heat.
yeah.
Poikilothermy or ectodermy typically
Ectothermy.
Ectodermy means skin. Ectothermy means that
Well-
you
External
get
heat.
Well,
Yeah,
here's
heat
the
from
thing.
external.
That's not necessarily true. Ectoderm. God damn it. Ectotherm means yes.
I fucked with this conversation.
Ectotherm means yes, you're reliant on outside temperatures. Poikilotherm does not mean that. Poikilotherm means you have variable body temperature.
Okay.
Homeotherm versus so when you talk about body temperature, you have 4 different terms, and they are
Endotherm,
not.
ectotherm.
Ectotherm versus endotherm, and poikilotherm versus homeotherm, and they can overlap. Ectotherms, in general, are going to be poikilotherms.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's not always the case if you're in an environment that has a permanent
The situation of a
temperature.
shark, if you're constantly moving, you're generating heat, you're technically a poikilotherm, but you're an
yes.
ectotherm. But you're an endotherm.
Yes. But again, that gets you into this weird kind of gray area between ectotherm and endotherm.
I think the really interesting thing about this, at least from an evolutionary standpoint, is that, while in mammals it all seems to be something that has evolved once. I mean, obviously it's evolved separately in birds and in other lineages
And
in various different ways.
it evolves multiple times in birds too.
Yeah.
And it shows up in multiple different lineages. It's very bizarre. And if you look at some mammals, they're really, really shitty endotherms.
As far as with birds, is it evolving multiple times, or is it like parallelism, switching on and switching off? Like, basally it's primitive,
I suspect
but
it's
switching
basically on
switching
and then
off.
switches off and
Not
on.
necessarily, because
Because
Archaeopteryx
so many
is
of
probably
the
not
sister groups, when you're
endothermic.
looking at your
How do we know?
theropods, when you're looking at your
Well-
sister theropods, it's suggested that most of those have to be warm-blooded.
That depends on
Depends on the group you're looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, giganticism is not the same thing.
No, I wasn't going for giganticism. I was going for like the bone density issues on certain carnivorous theropods.
The problem with Archaeopteryx is that we can't section any of the bones. That's the
Yeah.
only way we can know is by histologic sectioning. But,
I mean,
enantiornithians are not endothermic.
but they're also incredibly
Primitive. Well, not primitive, but
they're incredibly derived in their own way.
they are incredibly derived in their own way, but they also split off very early.
Yeah, but I mean that doesn't. I mean, if the branch is long, there's a lot of wiggle
There's
room.
possible
that can go
wiggle
on.
room.
Possible wriggle room, but endothermy isn't really something you turn on and off like a switch.
I mean, that's a debatable question. We don't know. I mean, that's something you can throw out there saying you can't turn on and off a switch, but we really don't know.
The only reason we
whether or
know
not
that
we
is
can.
the only reason we say that
is because
all
mammals
the-
have done it, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
but the thing with mammals is that if you look at what groups are shitty endotherms, it's all stuff that's pretty primitive. Marsupials, xenarthrans. Xenarthrans are terrible endotherms. That's why we don't have armadillos very far north. Because if they get north of Oklahoma and they freeze to death. So
Well, I mean,
to be
endothermy has
fair-
evolved multiple times, at least in Animalia as a whole.
Yes.
I was just going to
Yes.
say, to be fair, that's not really a question of whether or not something's a shitty endotherm. You take anything that's desert adapted, you move it into the Arctic, it's going to
It's the thing,
fucking
if you-
die.
no,
if
that's
you go
that's
into-
not the
It's about
that's not
growing
the
an
same thing.
ichthyosaur on land.
Here's the
isn't
thing.
It?
The
That's
thing about
not the same
endothermy
thing.
is
Nice
not
try to
necessarily
segue.
about generating heat. It's about regulating internal temperature.
Yes.
And if you're in a really hot climate, you don't want to be an endotherm because all you're doing is trying to constantly cool yourself
down.
off.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's true.
And so if you then get moved into a cool environment, then you're just fucked.
Yeah.
But the thing with armadillos and other xenarthrans and some marsupials is that they're just bad at temperature regulation.
Again, you say
really
xenarthrans
bad
are
at it.
basal. They're called xenarthrans, but nobody still really knows where they go.
Yeah.
They could be offshoots of carnivora. They could be.
Eh.
I mean, they're
No,
often put
no.
as sister group to this fictitious insectivore clade, when insectivory is just a primitive condition for mammals.
I feel like we've gone completely
Well,
off track.
I
So,
started.
man,
Here's the
how
thing.
else
Wait a
did
minute.
you gone
Right,
into
sorry,
it?
Here,
we were
I actually was telling you a
Ichthyosaurs.
story about sharks, and then you guys started talking about fucking endothermy.
Right, sorry,
So,
tell us about the sharks. Jim.
What I was actually
Wait,
sort
do
of
we have to listen to a story about the sharks?
well, sharks are really one
It'll
of my
make
most
it'll make him
interesting
feel
things.
better. Just
Okay,
let him
okay,
tell.
I'm gonna let
Do you know if you patronise
sharks
me
are
too
cool.
much, I'll murder Randol. No, the cool
It's
thing.
true, he'll do it.
Because you mentioned the kink in the
might have a
tail,
chance
and
against
this was a
Shark
really
Randall.
long lead into talking about the kink in the tail. And the cool thing about the kink in the tail, the kink in the tail in the sharks goes up, and it's cartilaginous, so you don't get preserved. And basically, it generates downward force in the opposite direction to the way the bone is. So sharks generate lift, ichthyosaurs generate dive, and ichthyosaurs probably were massive divers where they just gulp air and then dive straight down. And some of them have really big eyes, and it's really cool that you can look at the functional morphology and do the physics and look at the thing and realize that these were probably deep diving swimmers, a lot of these, at least the tuniform ones, and that it was just so they can go up, grab air, and then power right down.
And if I can interject here,
Exactly.
I meant to send out this paper and I forgot, and I apologize for that.
Okay.
There was a really cool study that was done. I don't know how long ago. because Bruce was talking about it this week, and Bruce Rothschild, who's a paleopathologist here at KU, worked.
Is that what he does?
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
well, he's an rheumatologist, but he comes
Okay.
in and does paleopathology here for fun. And when he first met Larry, they were working on
The paleopathology book?
they did do that. Yeah, they wrote that, but that was some years after they met. But they were working on the bends in ichthyosaurs. And
that's been seen in some plesiosaurs
in
as well.
plesiosaurs
And
and in
mosasaurs.
mosasaurs.
Yeah.
So what the bends are is anybody who knows anything about scuba diving, whenever you go down below a certain, is it 25 feet? Or something
I don't
like
really
that?
know.
There's
these,
a constant pressure shrinking the oxygen. There's just
Right.
a point where it starts getting through your capillaries.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
when the nitrogen concentration starts to get shitty.
and it builds up and builds up until you have to decompress in stages when you come up. If you don't, you get nitrogen forming in your bloodstream, and it's extremely painful, and you can die. And so you have to decompress in stages, and if you don't, you get something called the bends.
That's why at the minimum you're told to breathe out on the way up.
Yes.
Yeah, while coming up, constantly breathe out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what Bruce was looking at is he realized that a lot of these ichthyosaur vertebrae had pathologies. And so they started sectioning them, and he realized this is consistent with what we see in animals and people who have suffered the bends. And so what happens is you get these deep diving ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and mosasaurs. If something startles them or whatever, they pop right back up to the surface and they get the bends.
But it doesn't always kill them because
It
some of them
doesn't.
are healed.
It doesn't, and you
And
actually
it could be an
almost-
experience thing.
It almost never kills them.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're designed basically the ichthyosaur body. Ichthyosaurs in particular, I don't know so much about plesiosaurs. The entire thing is almost held together by internal pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like basically they're just like coiled springs, and that's how they work. And like
Yeah.
everything is just reams of muscle running alongside the body, which is why when they die, they rot and then they literally explode. And that's why the corpses are often very disarticulated. So
And bloated.
So it's kind of cool that they can, in a way, it's kind of like it probably sucked for them, but kind of absorb the damage.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't an extremely pleasant experience, but they don't die from this because the damage has started to heal. That's why you see these paleopathologies. When you get a pathology in a bone, it's not because it killed the animal. It's an artifact of an injury or disease that started to heal. And it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just had the picture of Woody Allen voicing every single plesiosaur.
Wait, every single plesiosaur go. I think it's go. Oh god. I just don't know what's down there. Oh jeez. Oh, I'm nauseous. I talked to my analyst. He says I probably shouldn't be swimming right now after I've been eating.
Hey, Woody! Where the fuck you go?
Yeah, paleopathology as itself is a pretty cool thing. The most famous example is probably the big owl skeleton,
Yeah,
which is the
tons of-
allosaur.
Yes.
Tons of stuff.
Broken ribs and
Good news. Robert's and Dave's and Bruce's and Larry's paper on a T-Rex bite on a hadrosaur tail.
Okay.
Oh wait, maybe this is still under.
doesn't matter. You can,
Non-disclosure.
It might be under embargo. I might not be able to talk about it.
Yeah, then you probably shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah, I shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that next time
Okay.
because I'm sure it'll be.
Maybe not. You're going to be in
Maybe.
China.
No, I'll be here for that next weekend.
I'll be here for next week.
Because I don't leave till the 9th.
so
Nice.
can I
Good.
just ask you one question, Horner? Pissed off or happy?
I'm pretty sure he's pissed off.
Oh, cool! I know what it's about then. I know exactly how much healing's gone on.
When we go on to the break, I'll tell you guys about it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, guys.
we're talking about ichthyosaurs, and specifically, we've got two interesting papers that seem to complement each other pretty nicely.
Yeah, although the second one I noticed only cites the first at the very end, and for something the first doesn't really talk about.
Yeah.
I love that.
So,
They
James,
look at pictures.
James, why don't you explain to us at least what the 2011 paper was talking about?
Okay.
The first one, the one that shows some interesting potential patterns about
Okay.
evolution.
So the reason I know this paper is because it was one of the big sort of inspirations for what I'm doing for my PhD thesis in terms of methodology and things to look at. And what they're doing is taking relationships of ichthyosaurs. So they've got a fairly well-constrained phylogenetic tree, and using this character data and the range data and the relationships to look at the effect that the Triassic-Jurassic, particularly mass extinction, had on the ichthyosaur lineage. Excuse me. And whether or not, basically the main reason that this research was done, to backpedal a little bit, is because
we talked about this actually a little bit. The earlier ichthyosaurs are really variable in their form.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they sort of streamline into what seems to be a very simple tuniform kind of.
Tuniform, dolphin-like.
But
Also, I
interestingly-
find it really interesting. You harp on people for pronunciation. You say tuna, but you said tuniform.
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 THU, not TU.
Yeah, whatever. Regardless.
THUNNIO.
THU?
Yeah.
THU.
Jesus, I've been reading it wrong.
Thuniform.
THUNNIFOR.
So it's a thuniform as
No, it's
opposed
tuniform.
Tuniform?
It's Latin.
ton. He said ton. Anyway.
But the interesting thing is, despite the fact you're very right that they very quickly sort of get limited to a very tuna-like shape. Tuna, by the way, is what you would call tuna.
So we're starting that game now, huh?
To
I'm
be-
just going
to be
to explain
fair-
to Americans.
To be fair, if you are going to be any kind of speed swimmer,
Yeah.
The fish
or
of the sea
agile-
is the best way to
agile
be.
swimmer, you are really strongly restricted to a certain body
I
plan.
don't
Yeah.
see Charlie being that fast.
Charlie the tuna? Charlie can't get caught. That's the problem. Charlie's too fast. He can't get caught.
I'm going to make tuna noodle
But
casserole
Charlie
for us
goes out of
next
his way to
time.
get caught.
Charlie tries, but nobody wants
You
Charlie.
can't eat it. It has cream and mushroom soup
I
in it.
do tuna hash, which is tuna.
We're just
and
talking about
peppers
tuna.
And
We're talking about important things,
Anyway.
like whether or
Okay,
not Charlie
so
the
and the
tuna
interesting
can
thing
get
is,
caught.
despite the fact that there's this very limited body form post-Triassic, people still said that they weren't affected by the end Triassic mass extinction because they radiated out into all the same niches
Yes.
and took on lots of different life habits, and so it really didn't affect them. So this study looked to quantify morphologically whether or not there's what we term a bottleneck, so basically a reduction in morphology that left gaps in morphospace that these things just didn't re-inhabit.
Yes. So it's an interesting idea that an extinction event can have multiple effects beyond just like killing you completely. It could either limit your morphological variability, which is the evolutionary bottleneck, or Jablonski had also suggested the dead clade walking scenario, where even though you get through just fine, you for whatever reason don't continue
Yeah.
speciating after the extinction
that's-
event
Like
and just slowly
muskrats.
die out.
Yeah. And I mean, that's
Several
something
of your
that I think the
trilobites.
second paper could have
Yeah, several
discussed,
of your trilobites.
but didn't. But, well, I mean, it happens to Curtis's clade of trilobites. The former happens to my clade of trilobites.
It's true.
The interesting thing as well is the reason people said that this extinction didn't do anything is because after the extinction there are even more species because they're using
Yeah.
strict diversity count and they speciate like crazy. The interesting thing is what this paper shows is that they speciate like crazy without changing drastically.
What I think it was interesting that I mean, I don't know if anybody's looked at it or if anybody's done this research, but looking at extinction rates, I mean, couldn't you see if there was a spike in extinction to see whether or not that would...
They haven't done that, and that's exactly what I throw in to make my research new.
Okay. I'm just saying, if you were to throw in a
Copyright, James Lance.
No, copyright Curtis, stolen by James.
copyright Michael Foot. Let's be
Understood
honest.
by Curtis, stolen by James.
Understood by many other people before
Yeah.
me, but yeah.
The other cool thing is if you compile that with Wagner's morphological change rate, which you can use for phylogenies, which is way harder to calculate, that can tell you how quickly evolution is happening as well as speciation extinction.
That'd be interesting. See character evolution, see whether or not you're speeding up immediately after and see whether or not there's a disconnect between character evolution and speciation rate.
Yeah.
Because if you see very little morphological evolution, but a lot of speciation events,
Yeah.
that would be an interesting disconnect.
And people tend to ignore that possibility because people still quietly tend to assume evolution is kind of agenetic.
Yeah, but I think it'd be really cool if you could get a lot of speciation with very minimal play up with body plans, just because that would be like your evolutionary bottleneck. That would be a bottleneck scenario.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I want to look into Enneatornithians with that.
Somebody has there was at the conference in England, and they were doing the rate of change of birds.
Oh, really?
And they had theropods as an outgroup. And they showed that there's this massive burst of speciation between the theropod outgroup and Archaeopteryx. And then evolution just slows down. Like they get locked into their body form, like you've noticed with like that paper on the wings and stuff like that. And then they don't change drastically in terms of bone morphology. But the trouble is, we know birds change very drastically in other things like song and.
Well, the trouble
pretty
with
much.
that is that the stuff I'm working on shows that that's not necessarily the case, and we talked about that.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. I mean, the other interesting thing is like in Enneatornithines, are they a clade? If they're a clade, are they doing their own weird things? This is why I know you're not a big fan of necessarily relying too heavily on trees, but why trees are very important for that kind of study.
Well, maybe once I get all this done, I'll have you do a tree and we can work together on something.
Well, I'd be very happy to do that, but I'd need you to inform me on characters, because one of the worst things you could do is do a phylogeny on something you know fuck all about.
No, that's fine. I need you to run.
Okay, that's okay,
I
James.
can-
Just spend
I
2.5 years of your life doing a phylogeny.
I can give you all the characters. I just need you to run the program.
Okay, yeah, sure. So this paper I thought was very cool. And as I say, this influenced me rather heavily in terms of what I thought was very interesting from a research paradigm point of view. The key conclusion that they get out of it is that
So how do they actually conduct their study
Do
for
they use
morphological?
PCA or PCO?
PCO, because we're
PCO.
using discrete character
Okay, so
data.
PCO, what are you talking about?
Okay, so Amanda does PCA while I go and get a beer. I'll come back and do PCO.
Okay, PCA is principal component analysis, and essentially, and I'm still trying to find a paper that actually breaks this down into a reasonable and understandable definition that I can. That's my problem. So okay, so essentially,
You're all completely off mic, James. Thanks for yelling.
what he said was you won't. And there's no real nice way to break PCA down into any way that real people will actually understand what it does.
Yeah.
It's a multivariate
Multivariable statistical analysis.
No, you're wrong, Randall. It's multivariate.
Multivariate statistical analysis. So essentially what this does is it looks at variable. It looks at more than two variables, so three or more.
Yes.
And
In n-dimensional space.
in n-dimensional space.
Yeah.
And essentially what it does is it takes your data and it puts it in a hypothetical morphospace. Plots it in
It tries to explain the variability in your data set given certain parameters that are based upon your data set.
Yes. And when you use morphologic characteristics like I do, then you end up with a hypothetical morphospace.
Yes.
And so essentially what you get, and the way you visualize this is you get a scatter plot.
Yes.
And and you will get a number of what are called principal components. And each principal, as many variables as you use, that's how many principal components you get. And each principal component will represent a certain amount of your variation.
Yeah.
So one thing that you should always do when you run PCA, which I didn't do the first time I ran PCA, and we'll ignore that I wasted 2 months on this.
You didn't waste it. You learned how to use this stuff.
I didn't log the data. Always log your data because, most of the time you're going to be skewed in one direction or the other based on body size when you're doing morphometrics. So, shut the fuck up.
I'm just saying I'm awesome because I
So,
noticed.
Always do that. But then what you get is you get a series of principal components, and you can look at what are called the loadings, which looks at how each variable that you're using per principal component, how each of these variables influences the data point. So, like, for instance, I'm using a hind limb analysis. So the 3 hind limb bones in birds. You can have positive or negative loadings, and that represents where it plots on the axis. If it's negative, it's going to be on the left side. If it's positive, it's going to be on the right side. So if you have something where the tarsometatarssus has a really strong
I feel like we're getting
loading.
way too
James,
detailed.
how does this relate to fish lizards?
Okay, I'm done.
I don't mean to interrupt. I just feel like you're getting way too detailed
Because
on
what
this.
Amanda's going into is a completely different podcast in itself.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, so principal component analysis is really useful and fun, and yeah.
But basically what she has done rather nicely is told you how it works, which is really important because PCO is pretty much the same but slightly differently related fish.
Wait, slightly differently related fish? Is it a fish lizard?
No, it's just a fish.
Okay.
It's a species of fish.
Different type of fish.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of different statistical fish in the sea?
Anyway.
I got a laugh out of Amanda on that
You
one.
made him sad.
I am staring him down.
So the thing with PCO is, or at least the way they use it, is basically taking discrete character data, so where you have binned biological characteristics into either presence or absence or different states of, say, tail forked, straight or round, and then that'll be 3 states. Now the thing is, because you have binned these, you yourself have put a skew on the data. So you use principal coordinate analysis because you're not using real data, you're using observed interpretations of real data. So what this does is exactly the same method, but instead of having a single fixed point, it generates a probability density of where this point actually is in regards to how you've observed the data. And you get exactly the same thing and exactly the same way of interpreting it, but it is really hypothetical morphospace.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's fair because you have interpreted all the data the same way, and you're using phylogenetic data usually, which is why this is being used. But it's the same thing with Amanda's PCA stuff. You always need to remember that what you're looking at is a hypothetical morphospace that doesn't bear any relation to any other analysis that was ever done.
And also it's important to remember that these are basically subjective based on your binning. One of the advantages that you do have with PCA is, as Amanda was talking about, you've got your direct measurements of your tarsus metatarsal.
You're using straight measurements.
I mean,
that
to
you
be fair,
take from the fossil.
it's give and take on both. There's benefits and problems with both.
And here's
Right.
the thing. When you're using PCA, you're using measured data, and that will tell you very clearly how things relate to each other, but it's not often going to give you any idea of their evolutionary history, because that kind of thing is very convergent.
Well, continuous characters
Yeah.
in evolution are difficult to
Yeah.
gauge.
The concept of using the PCO method, or the why we use PCO for this method, is the idea that we can quantify evolutionary meaningful characters that aren't going to be highly convergent, and then plot those out and see whether or not you genuinely lose aspects of morphospace.
So
Right.
looking at
Now, so that's okay. I just wanted to say what I'm doing with PCA is I'm trying to break things out into
Ecophenotypes.
things like life habitat groups, things
Yeah.
like that.
And
So
that's why the heuristic measurements really work for that.
yes, and that's one of the things that PCA is really good for. So that's a big difference between PCA
One of
and
the things
PCO.
I really want to do in the future is take the same group and do PCA and PCO analysis and see how well the two corroborate each other.
Just wondering if anybody's done that.
No. No, they
Really,
haven't.
nobody's done that.
No, why would they?
Well, because it's something that's so fundamentally simple.
Yeah, but who thinks about doing that stuff?
typically one person. Typically, you get trained in one method. That's what you do.
I guess.
Um,
I was never trained in any of these methods. I taught myself how to do it.
It's okay, I think that's all of us with everything we do, more or less.
So, what were the results of their PCO when they finally finished?
So, what they kind of showed was that your Triassic basal swimming forms that look more like moray eels, they go extinct, and you never get that kind of form re-involving. This is likely because once you enter a tuniform body type, it's very hard to get out of it. You're very locked in. There's so many characters linked into that type of lifestyle that you can't get out of it very easily. It's what's called the left wall.
There's sort of a developmental hardening as well.
Yeah.
Well, developmental hardening is actually more of an active process where you're thinking about like development becomes more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a situation where you've evolved yourself into a body form where you can't change much without killing yourself.
You've
Yeah.
evolved yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, despite that, there is still evolution and variation going on, except it's all within the variations of the tuniform body plan. The other interesting thing is that they show that basically they take a hit at the end Triassic, and they never reach the same amount of disparity that they had before, even though taxonomically, in terms of number of species, their diversity increases. And this is another...
Well, that's because you lose the eel form.
But there's also various clades of tuniform, like ones that go extinct, that you never get that kind of body plan re-evolving.
The Jurassic more or less has.
So how
one
exactly do they estimate
outline.
disparity in this case? Because I feel like that's a big issue.
So disparity, literally, this is why one of the reasons they do the PCO is disparity is basically looking at relative perturbations in morphospace, and that once they lose tax at the end Triassic, their morphospace is much more restricted. And what they do is they because they know which ones are the clades, which ones are actual groups, because they have the phylogenetic analysis, they make those into units, and they can compare the size ranges of the units to each other and see if the variance of those units overlaps or is distinctly different. And they show that there is a distinct decrease in variance post-Triassic.
There was something about the
Here's-
time binning being important, though, right? Like
Maybe-
they only
well-
saw it when they were binning it for specific time periods as opposed to the total data.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't ichthyosaurs more, I don't want to say common during the Jurassic?
Yeah, they're way more species.
Yeah.
Highly taxonomically diverse, but much less disparate.
Disparate, yeah. Because if I'm sitting here, I'm trying to remember when plesiosaurs, because what ends up happening is plesiosaurs and mosasaurs essentially take over the aquatic reptile niche, not niche, but environment.
Well, they're very common in the Cretaceous.
They're
Yeah.
very
There's
common in
also
the Cretaceous,
Cretaceous.
but I
The
don't
main
think they
difference-
evolve until the early Cretaceous.
You've got Norian little
I think
shitty.
it's late Jurassic.
Is it late Jurassic?
Yeah, I
well,
think
you've
it's
got
Jurassic.
nothosaurs and
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah.
But those aren't true plesiosaurs.
No,
Those
but
are
that's
like
probably.
they're
I mean,
related.
basal.
they're
Basal.
basal. Yeah.
So that the body type as it is was there.
But mosasaurs are Cretaceous only.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Well, that's because but you're seeing a decrease in pliosaurs.
Yes.
And you get an increase in mosasaurs.
In mosasaurs, yes. No, I'm thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
What
The other
this is
thing
for, right?
The other
Yeah.
thing as well is that during the Triassic, you have what's essentially a big continent that's basically a big fuck you animals, which is just one big desert.
Wait, it's a big fuck you animals?
Yeah.
It's a big fuck you
Welcome
animals
to
continent.
Big Fuck You Animals.
That does not sound like a park I want to go to.
It's like the Thunderdome of
But when the
Geological
Pirates of the
Times.
Fun.
but when the Pirates of the Caribbean break down, the pirates don't fuck the tourists.
Or do they?
oh
To
my.
be fair, they're pirates. That's
They-
like half
to
of
be
what they do.
To be fair, that is true.
But
They don't fuck the male
Also, to be
tourists.
fair, it's Disney World. Are we gonna get sued now?
Mostly.
I don't know, maybe.
I don't know if they're
We
probably not
also
listening.
quoted a Steven Spielberg movie,
That's true.
but added fuck in it, so
It's
it's
okay.
different.
It's okay. No matter what happens, the corporations will find a way.
That's true. The corporations will find a way.
But what I was sort of trying to get at was that when you get to the Jurassic, you get way more shallow inland seas, which is perfect for an increase of basically reef area and photic zone, which is what you need for increased biodiversity within the marine realm.
Right, and in general, you're getting more area
Yeah, exactly.
for things to actually move into and speciate.
Think about
Potentially, though,
surface
are you
area
also
to-
not just getting more area for preservation as well? Like, we're
Yes.
not getting
Oh,
any
yeah.
ichthyosaurs that were over in the ocean.
Yes.
You are, but it's got to be in really, 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 really special
Yeah,
I mean-
situations.
I did my undergraduate dissertation, which is a piece of rubbish, on the
Hey, mine was too. High five.
Jurassic Cretaceous of the South,
For the
South
record,
England.
your high five wasn't loud enough to be picked up by the mics. That you faked it.
Still fake.
Is that good?
No, it's good.
Okay, we can delete the fake one.
Nope.
And yeah,
Our failures will be preserved for all eternity.
and it's really interesting. And basically, again, this is a taphonomic thing, but you've got a constantly shallowing sea. And the record starts off with the Cameridian, which is basically a lump of poo. That you just get mud and fucking ammonites that are crap. And then you start getting interesting things as it gets shallower and you start getting carbonate system deposits.
Okay.
We started off on something.
We were talking about disparity overlap and what that
taphonomy.
means.
No,
we weren't talking about taphonomy at all.
Preservation of them.
Diversity.
Well, there was we had a brief aside about preservation on the ocean and whether or not it'd be hard. You're
James
just
got
opening up.
into a story and he doesn't know
No,
where it's
I
going.
didn't get into a story. People started talking about something else.
Anyway, what we were talking about with the paper was the disparity issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do they calculate disparity?
Well, I said about the variance. I mean, I've lost the thread completely.
Okay. Well, James, at the end of the paper, then what do they conclude?
That there was a bottleneck at the end Triassic.
That there-
Oh, I know what you asked. You asked about binning.
Oh, yes.
Binning.
It was a
Yes.
while ago.
Yeah, but that was like the thing we needed to talk about.
Yeah, but we
tired.
had 3 other conversations before we got to binning.
No, that was the thing that I was going to talk about next.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And there's a methodological flaw, if you will, in this paper.
Okay. Oh, is this the issue where they don't see it? They only see it in the individual time slices. They don't see their overlap issues in the full data set.
The reason they have to bin, and they bin to upper and lower Jurassic and upper and lower Cretaceous.
Yeah.
The reason they have to have such large time bins is because they don't account for ghost ranges.
Okay.
Normally, what you would do in this kind of analysis is extend the ghost range and assume it was present after it split.
Yes.
They didn't do this, and that's why you have to have such large time bins. Otherwise, you'll have entire time bins where there is nothing in it, even though you know there must be, because it's in there later on.
True.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is the one flaw with the methodology and why they need such large time bins.
And that's also something that I guess we'll probably get to after the break when we talk about our next paper. So I guess we'll see you then. That's a lot of fun.
Yes, Amanda. David Carradine.
No, I knew about that. No, that one I knew about mostly because he died while hanging himself in the closet, gripping his junk.
Jesus.
The things you learn by reading shit on the internet. I don't know.
Well, David Carradine was a sex fiend.
Oh yeah.
How did David Carradine die? He was in the closet.
Oh.
But the door was open.
Isn't it fairly recognized that he had various tastes?
I don't
No, Amanda,
know
it was
anything
that
about
magic
what the
plant that
fuck you
also
people are
killed
talking
Bruce Lee.
about.
Do you know Zachary Quinto came out 2 years ago?
Yeah, I knew about that.
Yeah.
Good for him. Oh yeah.
That's why he plays a Vulcan.
So, gay people are Vulcans?
Leonard Nimoy is not gay. He's been married for 50 years.
So was Freddie Mercury.
Freddie Mercury was bi, dumbass.
Really? Are you sure?
Yes, I'm sure. Because Nicole was obsessed with him.
My mother is.
He's...
Bi?
Oh, no, wait, goddammit, that's David Bowie. God damn it.
What?
David Bowie is bi. Sorry, I switched up attractive androgynous men in my head. Except that Freddie Mercury wasn't androgynous when he had the mustache.
No, Freddie Mercury was very much a man's man.
Shut up, James. Sorry, David Bowie. No, Freddie Mercury wasn't married, was he?
Yeah. Well,
David Bowie is married.
Freddie Mercury, if not married, had a... No,
No.
he was married.
No, he wasn't.
Get your phone out.
Okay, I'm gonna Google it.
Raymond
Okay.
Burr was married and had multiple children.
He wasn't gay.
Yes, he was.
Raymond Burr?
Yes.
God damn it, I never knew anything.
Here's the thing. If it's in the 60s or 70s, I don't think being gay or not gay really applies.
No, if it was in the 60s, you gay? You're fired.
Yeah.
That's the reason why George Takei didn't come out.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Oh, except that I spelled... Huh. No, he was never married. He was in a long-term relationship.
It's pretty much the same thing.
That's weird.
That's not pretty much
How
the
is
same
that weird?
thing.
Because he was gay.
It was a different time.
That's true. Hang on, let me...
It was a very different time.
And even when he came out, he stayed with her.
Well, he came out when he was dying
They
of
were only
AIDS.
together for 6 years.
Yeah, but he was still very, there was a close friendship still. And he came out when he sang The Great Pretender. It's just nobody understood it.
Although Wikipedia acknowledges him as bisexual.
Well, I knew David Bowie was bisexual. I didn't know about
What does Wikipedia
Raymond
acknowledge?
Freddie.
Here's the thing. I really don't know if Wikipedia is the decider of everything in the world. If Wikipedia says, oh, no, sorry, that didn't
Hang
actually
on.
happen.
You
Did
know
you-
what?
did-
I'm gonna
World War
fucking-
II was actually
you know
fought
what?
over cheese.
You
That's
know what?
Wikipedia-
I'm going to text Nicole, because if anybody knows, Nicole will know.
She's
Here's
the
the
one
other
who
interesting
edited
thing.
Wikipedia.
You're trying to assign a box label to people.
Yeah,
That
it never
doesn't
really
work.
works.
What
That's
was
true.
What was the
and there
conversation we
are-
had on the way over here?
Were we
don't
discussing
remember.
Kinsey?
Well, but there have been studies that show that there are varying degrees of sexuality.
Yeah, Kinsey, some of the primary work that he did.
Yeah.
Well, that's because Kinsey just wanted to get laid.
Also, there's a possibility you get more gay the more people there are. If you're crammed in. Penguins and dolphins.
Okay. I'm sorry. My
You know,
I've never
Californian...
heard the one about dolphins. before.
Californian sea otters, because there's now fewer females, lots of males, they will drown and rape seals.
So do we want to get started?
So
On that note,
that's
do we
kind
want to
of
get
worrying.
started?
Kind of worrying that Randall finds that funny.
Yeah, it is.
I've never known of another species besides humans that would go out
Dolphins rape anything. Dolphins
So
have
do
raped
ducks.
and
people.
murder another
Ducks.
species.
Ducks.
Oh, murder
What
and
the
other
fuck is something that eats something else doing?
Well, not for
Natural.
food. It was what he's saying. Just straight up murder something for just
Cats.
killing.
Fucking cats.
That's true. He has a point. Cats will
Well,
just kill the shit out
Cats
of
are
things.
jerks.
Well, yeah, sometimes.
Cats don't count.
Dogs. Dogs will see things and bite the shit out of them and then be like, oh, it's dead.
So do we want to, on that note, start?
Hold on, I'm still texting Nicole.
Okay.
About something that doesn't matter.
It's very true.
Shut
I've
up.
been recording for like the past 5
What, have
minutes. Yeah.
Wait, so you got the entire rape thing?
Yeah.
God damn it. Hey, to be fair, I'm not the one that's bad.
No. Dolphins will go rape anything.
Well, there was a species of beetle that, because females are hard to find, they will stab the male with their penis and inject their sperm into its sperm area, so that when it mates with a female, it injects the other male's sperm.
That one I've heard of before.
There's certain types of cephalopods that will actually like forcibly remove the sperm from the egg clutch of a different male, and they'll
It's
fight
a
over
really
that.
good thing that Nicole knows me as well as she does.
Why?
What did you text?
Was Freddie Mercury gay? And she's going to be like, wow, Amanda's
Hey,
really...
so this is a weird question, but I'm in the middle of an argument about Freddie Mercury. He was in a relationship with that one woman, Mary, right? I thought he was gay, though.
Okay.
He was in a relationship with her.
But he was also...
As were many men who were in the closet.
And she'll be like, wow, Amanda's really doing some research on her slash fiction this time.
Yep.
Actually, that probably wouldn't surprise her, but that's not the point.
Wait, the fact that you have slash fiction about Freddie Mercury, Freddie Mercury.
Eddie Murphy, Freddie Mercury slash fiction.
My eyes!
Oh, God almighty.
Do you think Freddie Mercury would force Eddie Murphy?
No!
Well, Freddie Mercury's obviously the man.
I feel like this is...
Can we not put that bit out?
I feel like this is the treat for everyone who listens an hour in. They get this conversation.
This is going places where I don't want to go. Let's talk about the second paper.
Yeah, let's do that, shall we?
Okay, we should
So
welcome...
Iraqi
No.
ichthyosaurs.
No, hey guys, welcome back. No, wait, 5 seconds of pause, and then
No,
we'll do
wait,
that.
no, we're
No,
just
no,
going.
just
We're
fucking
going
go.
at this point.
No,
It's
we're gonna
all
wait.
in. We're all in.
No.
Just like Freddie Mercury, we're all in.
You're never allowed to criticize Queen to me ever again.
Never, ever.
Never.
Ever.
Never ever.
No, it's fine. I know your point. Like, that is it. Criticize Queen, you dead. Someone's dead to you.
So I'm just sort of going over the meanings of the word know your point, given the conversation we just had.
James, it's just the tip.
So, second paper.
Yeah.
Iraqi ichthyosaurs.
Fish lizard.
Fish lizard.
We should have, damn it, I should have found out what fish lizard was in Iraqi.
I don't know.
I'd have to.
Durka Durka? No, we're not That's going.
Oh, God damn it, James.
It's okay, I've worked with people from Turkey.
Yes, you have.
Wait, that's like saying I have black friends.
I don't want to know what you just said, do I?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
You
Nope.
know the song, though.
Fuck yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
To be fair, the best bit about that is France. With croissants.
No, the best bit about that whole thing is Matt Damon. Matt Damon.
Well, if Matt Damon is listening, we like you.
No.
Everyone but James here likes your career, Matt Damon.
You okay there?
Yeah. I spilled water on myself.
Yeah,
I
Amanda.
can't actually speak for
Amanda is
Amanda.
livening up the podcast by spilling water all over her shirt.
Shut up.
I feel like, do we need to sign paperwork or something now? Like,
Well,
is
no, we
there-
need her to sign paperwork that she's not going to sue.
Okay.
Or, you know...
Did you take and pass the sexual harassment course?
Actually, yes, and it was the biggest waste of, 20 minutes of my life?
But she laughed, so it's consenting.
Yes.
It's consenting.
That's what the course told us.
What? What?
No, Tony,
Yes,
you remember
yes,
the questions
it
at
did.
the end? And it's like, Sally is whatever by all the whatever, and then like she feels pressure to join in, so she makes some jokes. Is it still sexual harassment? And everyone goes, yes. And it goes, no, she joined in, so it's no longer sexual harassment. I'm like, this isn't about sexual harassment. This is about the university finding ways not to get sued.
Hooray.
Wow,
why-
that seems
Which is
not
why we all have to be
correct.
careful around Paula, because she never took the test. And
Really?
she's a sexual predator.
She never had
Paula
to.
managed to never take the test, yeah.
That's amazing. I hate her.
So they found this.
I got 100% because I watched Curtis do it, and then I did it.
I got 100% because I heard Curtis and Matt bitching about it, and I got a beer and I finished that test.
I feel like you should be yelling, I learned from watching you.
I learned from watching you, man.
All right.
Anyway.
So, Iraqi specimen of ichthyosaur, which, first off, just cool that specimen's coming out of Iraq. That's
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
cool
really.
just to begin with. This
Yeah.
is
Yes.
2013. It's a recent paper in Biological Letters. Biology Letters?
Biology
Yeah.
letters, yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the previous record, I mean, stuff hasn't really been coming out of Iran, Iraq for like the past 30
That area.
years.
No, I mean, it's politically charged areas. It's difficult to get research scientists to go in there.
Especially
Yeah.
because where you tend to get outcrops tend to be valleys, and valleys are where things and people congregate when
Like
they don't want to be
poppies.
found.
Yeah.
There's that side of things, although Iraq isn't particularly known for that. I mean, I don't know if the anthrax grows up as far as Iraq. I know it does in Afghanistan. The main problem is that once the various
People who don't want to be found.
got pushed out of the cities, they started going into caves and ravines, which is where you will find a lot of these outcrops.
True.
When the Turkish Riptrid paper came out, or the guy sent me the geological settings, I removed a paragraph which is him explaining why, due to political reasons, it has been difficult to go to these areas for the last 5 years because of a state of emergency. And I'm like, that's really interesting, but we don't need to go into all of that. I just said, these areas have been inaccessible for over recent years.
There's a lot of areas we would like to go back into and can't.
Yes.
But Iraqi ichthyosaurs.
Yeah, so this is coming out of the Cretaceous, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Is
Sort
it
of mid-Cretaceous.
mid-
Yeah,
Cretaceous.
which is really unusual.
Especially because it's kind of a basal ichthyosaur.
Well, it's in their analysis they get it as sister group to Ichthyosaurus, which is your bog standard early Jurassic tuniform ichthyosaur.
Yes.
That position is very interesting. It suggests that there is. We've talked about ghost rangers a lot. Ghost rangers, of course, are where you have the thing that it's closely related to being much older than the thing you're looking at, and so you know that the thing you're looking at or its ancestor must have existed back when that thing existed because of the way speciation happens. And this suggests that there's about what we're looking at, like 50 million years
Something like that.
gap
Yeah.
in this group. The interest, I mean, they get different results for the phylogeny compared to the other paper. I don't know if you read how they did
Yeah,
that.
I didn't look into their supplemental material because I didn't have access to it to see
No.
how they got their phylogeny.
Neither did I. But they throw out any taxa that had less than 60% codings.
Yeah, which,
Okay.
I mean, I can understand in some respect because you could have some issues with question mark data, but
Yeah.
it is a little weird that they're just throwing out.
But it meant that
Taxa.
a lot of the Jurassic things that were a grade in the earlier paper come out as a clade now.
Okay.
Mm.
I mean, to be fair, that's questionable as to whether or not that's just because they're not getting the extra taxa that break apart those particular clades.
The reason they did this is because the tree in the previous paper was fairly well resolved. They added this new one, and it polytomied almost everything in the Jurassic.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. This will partly be because we've had 50 million years of evolution, and it doesn't quite know where to
Yeah,
put
there
it.
there is
Yeah.
a potential long branch issue where this thing has been its own separate lineage for a while now, and we don't know all the various bits that will connect it to the rest of the tree.
I can't remember. Is this a shallow marine environment?
I don't remember. I don't know if they actually talk much about
They don't
the
really
environment.
talk about
They
the
don't really
environment.
talk.
Yeah, they just
See-
give a cis paleo and a phylogenetic analysis.
Okay, I didn't think they did.
These papers, you're only allowed 1,500 words.
Oh shit. Well, it'd be interesting to look at the environment to see what kind of environment this thing is living in. If it is a sister group to such a sort of basal tuniform, ichthyosaur, what the hell happened.
Yeah, the first thing that popped in my mind is there some sort of preservation bias here?
Is it a
or-
preservation bias? Is it some kind
What
of
do you mean by
environment-
what the hell happened?
So we have this ichthyosaur gap, essentially.
I mean, sadly, that happens all the time.
I mean, you
It's
don't
a
work on
sampling issue.
arthropods. Everything in arthropods is gaps. There are more gaps than there are known record for a lot of these groups.
That's true, but this is, if I'm recalling correctly, this is like now the latest known ichthyosaur.
Not the latest known, but the latest known of this group.
Yeah, of this
Yes.
particular group.
It's the basically what they're saying is that there was a Jurassic morphology that goes extinct by the Cretaceous, and then you get different Cretaceous types. This is a Jurassic type.
Yes.
I have a couple of thoughts on why this might be. Either they did take a hit and their diversity just plummeted, and because you've only got one or two species alive at any one time for the next 50 million years, we're just lucky we've got this one.
Yeah, there could be a simple issue that if there's not a lot of species, and particularly if the group is on the way out, you might expect that its population numbers would be low,
Yeah.
and so it'd be difficult to actually fossilize
Yeah.
it.
The other possibility, which I consider more remote, but is still one you must think about, is considering if you keep all the evidence in there, the phylogeny is pretty poorly resolved. You need to think about the possibilities of some convergence going on. Given that this is 50 million years later and you're now into the Cretaceous, that's a vacant morphospace that perhaps it was starting to edge towards again.
So
However-
you're talking about a Cretaceous type ichthyosaur converging into the Jurassic type
Yeah.
ichthyosaur
So you're thinking that
body
this is,
form, right?
but their phylogeny plots them within the Jurassic stuff, right?
Their
It's not-
phylogeny plots them in a polytomy if they include all
Right.
the taxa.
Well, okay.
But the reason I don't think that's likely is because there really aren't any Cretaceous ichthyosaur characters, and this is the thing I'll say about convergence. Even when convergence is happening, you can tell it's happening because it retains primitive characteristics of the things that it's evolving from.
right.
This really does look like it's a genuine Jurassic-type ichthyosaur that is just in the Cretaceous. The other possibility is that a lot of this fossil record comes from North America and England and Western Europe.
Parts of Europe. Yeah.
This is the same with almost everything.
So
what
we
we're-
just don't have a record of the rest of the world.
Yeah, what we're finding now is that some of the major, important, interesting discoveries are going to be out in the Middle East and in the Far East.
Yep.
China is really coming into its own in terms of interesting fossil discoveries.
Yeah, because it's a previously untapped
Yeah,
area.
Exactly.
Russia's going to be the next big one.
Siberia.
Russia
Except-
definitely.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
Siberia,
there's,
yeah.
there's so much interesting things there that are sitting in museums. It's just because nobody has had access to the journals that they've realised that these things are important. So it could just be that we're looking at a biogeographical shift whereby these things have survived in, say, maybe more Gondwanan environments, and that we just haven't been sampling the fossil record where they've been till now.
It's entirely possible,
yeah, that could certainly be the case.
I mean, certainly it is. Let's see, we're going in the Cretaceous. At this point, the continents are roughly in areas that are similar to where we know now. Like, obviously, India hasn't yet collided with the rest of Asia.
And
Australia is in a
Antarctica
weird
and
place, and
Australia are
Antarctica is in a
still-
weird
yeah.
place. But regardless, everything is more or less in similar
the
positions.
Pacific
so there
is where
a,
it's supposed to be. The Atlantic is open.
there's a major split, what I'm trying to say,
Mediterranean,
between
yeah.
North America and between what's
Yeah.
happening in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And if most of our specimens are coming out of North America, I mean, that might explain why there is this, like, older lineage from a way further back period when things were closer
Yeah.
together that you're finding in Iran,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Iraq.
The reason I thought this was interesting is because I originally thought, oh, does this overturn some of the things that the previous paper had said? But the previous paper very specifically talks about the Triassic to Jurassic. They couldn't find a very clear signal from Jurassic to Cretaceous. And this might be why.
That's true.
If these groups weren't necessarily going completely extinct to the end of Jurassic, maybe the reason they're having difficulty finding a signal is because it was more of a gradual changeover and not linked to a sudden discrete event.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there isn't. Well, there is a faunal turnover between the Jurassic and Cretaceous, but it's not considered.
Well, I mean, that's actually one thing that
extinctions.
they question in this paper as to whether or not there is much of a significant faunal turnover in ichthyosaurs within the Jurassic and the Cretaceous.
Right. Well, yeah, that could. I was referring more towards a combination of terrestrial and marine fauna.
I mean, there's a reason that we have that we've divided a division up between the Jurassic and the Cretaceous in the first place.
But I was talking about that extinction levels do not rise above background.
True.
You don't see one of these mass extinctions.
Yes.
I think a lot of the concept of the Jurassic Cretaceous divide comes from, if I remember correctly, sauropods, and we've now found a ton of Patagonian and African sauropods that show these things survive. We're seeing a Diplodocus seismosaurid changeover.
Well, what it is you're getting a phasing out of sauropods and an increase in hadrosaurs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also a little bit of an old England bias, just because, I mean, that's where most of this stuff was actually divided up, and there you have the Cretaceous chalks, which is what Cretaceous means in the first place.
Yeah.
Yes.
Chalk.
Yeah.
And you get that here too.
You get that here too, but I'm just saying it's massive in England.
Oh yeah, in England it's enormous.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see this potential large potentially biogeographic split that's going on. That these things you're getting in a way earlier, or a lineage for that you have way further back in Jurassic has a representative in the Cretaceous that has been split across probably in the. I want to say, well, when would there probably have been no more interchange between North America and that area? Would it be Middle and Triassic?
No, Jurassic, I think.
Okay.
Early Jurassic.
So it does
if I
potentially
recall correctly.
correlate with roughly the time period.
Well, it depends on
with
how
the
you're
group.
doing it in terms of if these things could cross oceans, then that's no barrier to them. If they need to go on the coastline, things could still get from South America to Australia via Antarctica
That's
well into
true.
the Cretaceous.
Yes.
Good
yes.
point. Good
Into
point.
even into the Cenozoic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you hit in the Cretaceous, you're actually getting a situation where there's very little thermal variance between the equator and the poles.
Right.
I mean, that's when you're starting to get the crocodiles up in Antarctica.
Yeah.
For Christ's sake.
I mean, and what we're seeing there is a big changeover into a sort of modern continental system.
Yeah.
In the past, the ocean currents always seem to go from left to right if you're going to look at the standard global map. We're very unusual in that our continent's now oriented longitudinally.
Longitudinally.
And so the currents go north to south as opposed to east to west, and this means we've got a very different environmental system to what we've had before. And it's been suggested that this explains why our climate is
very unique
Yeah.
compared to what we had
Yes.
in the past.
It's a multiple thing. It's one of it is the circumpolar current.
We've no longer gone from this equatorial or at least like around the globe like a belt kind of circulatory system. Instead, we've gone to a north-south.
A circumpolar current and the north-south thing.
Well, circumpolar. Oh, right. Sorry. You mean the Antarctic?
The Antarctic circumpolar current. Yeah, that was a big thing because when that first happened in the Oligocene.
So circumpolar current, what we're referring to is that there is a massive sort of dividing current that separates Antarctica from the rest of everything else.
Yeah.
It's just this big circular current that surrounds Antarctica.
It's probably a relic of the original current system. It's the only place that it gets to do it still.
Well, what happened was when Antarctica finally separated entirely from South America and Australia, which I believe was in the Oligocene.
I think you're right.
That was when we first start seeing this massive drop in temperature because in the Paleocene and the Eocene it was so damn warm we had cloud forest in Greenland, which is like tropical rainforest.
Well, you used to have forests in Antarctica.
Exactly.
It wasn't until the first Eocene-Oligocene transition that you got the first glaciation.
Exactly. And part of that, it's believed, is partially because of that or in fact, mainly maybe.
There's a lot of other things, like isn't that the original closing of the Tethys Sea and various other things going in, like the beginnings of India compacting with Asia?
Partially.
And
that's the Miocene.
That's right, that's the Miocene.
That's the Miocene.
But we've kind of got a positive feedback loop going on here, because when you get the onset of glaciation, the influx of cold water is what drives a lot of the currents. And there are periods of time when there are almost no poles or very small poles, and having
or none at all.
Yeah, and having an enlarged ice cap, although it's shrinking, is kind of unusual.
It is a positive feedback system in many respects, but there's significant evidence that points to that opening of that circumpolar current helps sort of shut down that warm water coming from the equator and starts building up the ice cap in Antarctica. And once you start building that ice cap, it is a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
You're reflecting more light back into the atmosphere. And so, as a result, you're cooling global temperature even more.
Once you go cold, it's easier to go colder.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the whole ice, the snowball, Earth paradox.
Yeah.
Yes.
Daisy World.
Yeah. What?
Daisy World. You know about Daisy World?
I'm not.
No.
Not
Daisy
familiar with the
World
term.
is an albedo modeling system where basically you have sunlight and daisies, and if daisies grow to cover the world, or basically because they need sunlight, they're just going to reflect so much sunlight that you get the entire world covered in daisies and everything dies.
Okay.
Since it's an albedo is the right word, right?
Albedo is the right word.
I think
Albedo
so,
is
yeah.
light reflected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they use Daisy World as a way to model that in terms of cloud cover for CO2, but it also has implications for an ice snowball Earth scenario.
Okay, but they're using daisies.
Why
Just because
not?
they're white.
Daisies because daisies can self-replicate, and you could just
Daisies, give me your hands. Okay.
Anyway.
fish lizard.
Fish, lizards.
Does anybody know of anything else from Iran and Iraq out of the Cretaceous, vertebrate-wise? I am.
The only
Kind
thing
of
I can
a
think of is
Really,
Cenozoic.
Okay.
There's some tracks out of Iran, I think.
Yeah.
Some bird tracks, actually.
Bird tracks.
Out of Iran and mammalian tracks. I have a friend who is his parents are Iranian, and they left right when shit was going down, and he really wants to go back to Iran, and because he speaks Farsi,
Okay.
and he really wants to go back to Iran. He's a paleontologist, and he wants to find fossils in Iran, and he can't go back because he'll get conscripted into the army.
Yapes.
Because he's our age,
Yeah.
he's young, he's physically fit, and he's male. He'd get conscripted into the army.
Interestingly, though, I mean, if you're going to look at a well-studied system that's geographically close, you need to look at North Africa.
That's true.
Yeah.
And there's been a large increase in at least the early Cretaceous in terms of
Yeah.
dinosaur
Mhm.
faunas in North Africa.
Yeah,
Are
people
there
have
any-
started Morocco.
I was wondering from
Tunisia.
Morocco, because Morocco
Morocco,
has
yeah.
tons of Devonian, even Silurian,
Oh,
some
and they're
Ordovician
getting
stuff.
Yeah.
Cretaceous stuff now out of Morocco, like crazy.
Well, I mean, the Carcharodontosaur teeth have been being pulled out of the ground since time began in Morocco. They just
Yeah.
haven't been bothered to excavate properly.
yeah,
Where was the original Spinosaur? Is that Morocco?
that was
E-
Egypt.
Egypt.
Yes.
Egypt.
I know
But
it was
they've
stored
gone-
in Egypt, but
They've gone back to
There's a-
Morocco. Oh no, sorry, that was a giant crocodilian. Sorry,
No,
they found a giant
the
crocodilian in Morocco.
Godzilla was Morocco.
Oh, was it?
Godzilla? It's Crocodilia Godzilla? Or what?
They Natural Geographic dubbed it Godzilla.
They dubbed it
Yeah.
Godzilla. Okay,
Oh.
they didn't actually name it
No.
Godzilla, because that would be
No, I think they might have named it Gojira.
Gojira.
That's
Seriously?
amazing.
Wow, that's impressive.
But I don't know of many ichthyosaur finds, mainly because a lot of the North African system is terrestrial.
Yeah, it's all continental.
I think most of the aquatic stuff out of there are the early whales.
Okay,
That's in the
that's
Cenozoic.
going to be way post Cretaceous.
Yeah, you've passed.
Yeah, there is a marine basin that I know of.
Wait, do you have Freddie Mercury news?
No, unfortunately, it's my mom telling me about the Red Wings.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
They tied, which is good.
Hey, that's
Well,
good.
that's good. That's good.
I'm sorry, but you can't be sad today, Amanda.
You can't be sad because the Red Wings tied.
I'm sorry. She's running out of reasons.
Oh, okay, yeah, it's true. The Red Wings didn't lose.
They haven't lost yet.
Haven't lost yet. Well,
It's the playoffs. They could certainly lose.
okay.
Anyway, but they're not playing like a total ass, so that's good.
Well, it's good. It's difficult to play hockey while you are an ass.
Well, some people manage it very good. Look at Fedorov.
What?
Anyway,
The
that's a hockey joke. Sorry. I
five
love hockey.
people who will laugh at that will just love it.
Wait,
Ex-
there's
The
five
five,
people
the
who are
five
saying
out of
that?
our 30. That's quite good, actually. It's a high percentage.
Yeah.
So
I hate all of you.
don't worry, I like hockey. I just didn't know who that guy was.
Sergei Fedorov, a well-known douchebag.
Russian?
Yes.
Yes.
That's why he's probably drunk.
The rest of
Most
Paleo
players
After Dark
drunk?
does not approve of James's comments.
Come
No,
on,
wait, we need to have the anti-James disclaimer.
Oh yeah.
you don't have one usually.
It's our
do, you
token minority.
do you need one? Yeah, actually, you can't. Yeah, you're all racist to me.
You're all racist.
Hey, I'm a really nice guy. Like, I'm just lovely all the time, and you're just horrible to me. I mean, you're just turning me into bitter reflections of yourselves.
Bitter reflections of ourselves. So every insult, so wait, are you rubber?
And we're glue. Is,
Wait, yeah. I don't.
is that wait?
Yeah. No, you be rubber and we're glue.
I am an
and
elastic
everything
material
we
and you
throw
are an
at you
epoxy.
just sticks there and gets all icky. Wait, no, that's not how that goes at all.
Anyway,
So do we have anything more to say about Iraqi?
The one thing, because Randall's slight detour into National Geographic calling something Godzilla. One thing came up while I was reading this. The reason I found this paper is because I read a very interesting article in an Australian magazine, and the article is entitled "Living Fossil Ichthyosaur Discovered in Iraq."
Oh dear God!
And I was like, "What?"
It's a living fossil. It's a living ichthyosaur.
And then I read about it, and it's Cretaceous. I was like, "Okay, what's going on here then?" And it's like, "Oh, the media just loves the term living fossil. They're misusing it." The lead author in the Royal Society press release describes it as a living fossil of its time.
Living fossil. Isn't that like saying something is an instant classic?
God. And I saw
Jurassic
that,
Park, an instant classic.
and I know Amanda disagrees with me on this, and I know a lot of people disagree with me because they like the phrase.
I do like the phrase "living fossil," but I think it needs to be used in the correct context.
But it's meaningless because there is no. I mean, here's the thing.
Except for cubotops and onyx.
Coelacanth.
They're
No.
Not even coelacanth.
Let's be completely honest. The only living fossils are things that we can assign to the modern species, like all those mollusks in the Cenozoic.
Monopoclaphorans,
that are-
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
no, it's
No, I'm just
something
saying
that can
any
be-
Cenozoic mollusk that we still have living analogs of, but they're fossilized because they're old enough. Those are technically fossils that are
Actually,
still living.
monopoclaphorans are technically, I think it's the same lineage.
It's the same lineage, but it's not the same species.
everything's the same lineage as the lineage that existed a million years ago, because evolution is pretty linear. It doesn't jump around, thankfully.
But
We are living fossils of hominids.
shut up.
We're
Anyway,
living fossils of chordates.
My main
Yes.
thing, and this is a
I
good,
hate all of you.
This is
You can
no,
hate
you
as many
don't.
of us as you want. It doesn't make it not true.
You don't hate us. You
Amanda
need
just
us.
hates the truth.
The reason that this is a really cool example of this is everyone likes to refer to the term living fossil as something that looks like a fossil that they know.
Yeah.
That is an incorrect usage.
But that's how everyone uses it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
And-
the coelacanth thing, right?
yeah, and
it's
this
not
is-
the same
it's the
species
same
of
thing with
coelacanth.
horseshoe
It's not
crabs.
actually...
But
horseshoe
and
crab.
this is why this author described this thing as a living fossil in its time. But the thing is, it still has evolved. It's not identical. It's not a living fossil. Change has still occurred.
It's a different species. It's just a different species of something that we had thought had gone extinct by this point.
It's like
I'm going to disagree with you guys. And now, don't get me wrong. I don't think that they should be using the term "living fossil" of
In
its
this
time,
particular
because that's
situation, we are
utterly-
making a straw man argument
that's
for this particular
utterly
situation.
retarded. But I think that you can call something like a coelacanth a living fossil because it is a member of this lineage that we literally thought was utterly gone, wiped out,
So
totally
it's a living
extinct.
fossil if we've been retarded.
Yes,
very-
fine, whatever the hell you want to say. But
So horseshoe crabs, onychophorans.
I'd be okay with calling horseshoe crabs living fossils.
But we
They
always knew they were here.
barely changed.
They've changed
They've
a
changed
lot.
a lot.
They've changed massively.
From Paleolimulus.
Paleolimulus is a centimetre across. Limulus gets to about 34 centimetres. The tergites are much more suppressed. You can't see the individual
You're talking to
flowers in
someone
Limulus
who works
compared
on-
What are the ones that we pull out of what the fuck?
to I-70.
Yeah,
Paleolimulus.
those are not a centimeter across.
The biggest ones are about 4 centimetres.
That's 5 centimeters.
Okay, 5 centimetres compared to...
I feel like this is a semantic argument at this
It's
particular
not
point.
the point,
Well,
damn it.
I know what we're doing tomorrow. We're going out to I-70 and digging up horseshoe crabs.
Nope, that's illegal now
As
due
a,
to state law.
I might
Oh,
have
is
a
it
way.
really?
Really?
You have to have permits.
I
Oh,
might
I think we're getting permits.
Yeah, the university is
getting
getting
permits.
permits.
Oh,
but
Una is
it's-
getting
yeah.
permits.
I'm going. When
Oh,
they get
good.
it. I have other localities we need to go and look at,
I'm
which aren't on the
pretty
roadside.
sure we already have permits because I think the museum gets them.
Larry might have a permit.
Larry might have a. Well,
might be
I
in
don't-
Larry's name.
It might be in Larry's name.
I don't know if that's legal.
Also, I don't know if we never had the permit with us. We just went and did it because it was taking a long time.
Broadcasted on the internet.
It's okay. I'll put worse things online. I have actually some other localities we need to go and see at some point. On a slight, just before we wrap up, on a slight aside,
Okay.
topical news story. 2 years before the Scottish wildcat is extinct in the wild because of interbreeding with cats, with feral cats.
Oh,
really?
so
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it's interesting. This is an interesting situation. This is like the question of the polar bear potentially interbreeding with the grizzly bear.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a
Then
lack.
it wasn't a
it's
species. It was an ephemeral population which
no,
is being reabsorbed.
that wasn't what I'm getting at. It was on the way to becoming a species, and it is certainly a lack of diversity. But the genetic diversity is still technically there. It's breeding its way back into a different population. But it wasn't given the chance to separate itself and be endemic, and I think that's potentially the bigger issue.
The thing is, it was until we reintroduced feral cats.
Well, that's the big issue.
Yeah.
I would argue that then we're still dealing with a species, but you have to admit that humans fuck up a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Well, I think you
And
just,
I think that's kind of a similar situation that we're dealing with.
I'd
polar
hate to
bears.
pull this into the conversation that we had about Freddie Mercury, but just like Kinsey's look at sexuality being a grade, speciation is also a grade to some respects. I mean, you can have things that could potentially interbreed, but they're never going to meet each other, and they're going to have very distinct evolutionary trajectories, and then they might give rise to things that certainly can interbreed with each other, and those we would call species. But they had the potential to interbreed all along.
Totally.
They just never would have.
Well,
This is why you get eastern and western species of birds, where the eastern
Exactly.
species are slightly dusky.
or even north-south species of birds. And what happens is when you start, say you get some sort of slight habitat shift or what have you, and some species of this happens in warblers, and I can't remember the two species of warblers, but there's a northern species and a southern species, and the northern species is starting to move south, and the females of the southern species prefer the northern males. And so they will mate with the northern males over the southern males, and so what's going to happen is that species is eventually going to go extinct and just get
you know why?
incorporated into the northern.
yeah.
It's the accent.
It's the accent.
See, it's better, right?
Anyway, so
But the interesting thing of that is, as well, is like your carrion crow versus hooded crow. Carrion crows have a southeastern distribution. Carrion crows have a northwestern.
versa,
Hooded crows have a southeast, but there is a 14-kilometer buffer zone where they interbreed freely.
you see that in birds all the
Yeah.
time.
And that's why when Meyer did
what-
all of his work, he basically just caused a shit ton of subspecies.
Well,
that-
and what is interesting is that a lot of those hybrids don't get out of the F1 stage
yeah.
because for some reason they are just less fit. Either they don't, for whatever reason, they don't reproduce. They just don't get whatever. It's
This
very
is trouble with
very
mate
interesting.
recognition when you don't when
It
one of
c-
these
it
things
could
is not
be-
like the other.
Yeah, it could be, especially if you're dealing with certain species of warblers, which actually have different foraging positions on tree trunks. If you're going, if you're supposed to be in one area and you're not, you can really fuck up whether or not you can actually find food.
But I think, given that, because this is interesting, because it sort of fits in with Darwin's view of species, in that what you call a species is just the most dominant form, and another form will be more dominant, and you'll call that the species, even though it's sort of a different form. And then the other form can be more dominant again, you call that the species again, and species can change through time based on that. That's a very biological view. When you're looking, like we've got the Scottish wildcat, we think of it as a different species. If it gets reabsorbed, it obviously wasn't. And if you look at it from a geological point of view, that would be an ephemeral population that then rejoined up with the major population.
But it was potentially at some point, it had the possibility
Exactly.
of actually
Everything
splitting.
has-
And it was in the beginning
you've
of
got
the
the
splitting
potential.
stages. It
Yeah.
just got undone.
Exactly.
And I think, and I hate to, I mean, this may seem semantic, but I think especially when we have cases where humans have clearly affected any kind of speciation event, and you, like with the Scottish cat, or you can see even Darwin's finches today.
Yeah.
Human interactions on the Galapagos have actually started changing what beak morphology is most dominant.
Well, I mean, it's another selective pressure in some respects.
It is, but it's an anthropomorphic one. And we kind of need to, I think we need to step back and really sort of consider, should we look at how people are affecting these things, and should we take that into consideration?
Well, I think this is actually something that I don't want to get into, because this is something I think we'd
It's
have a
a
whole other
completely different
podcast
topic.
for.
That's true.
Yeah.
But this is getting into the whole notion of Darwin's evidence for the origin of species was breeding experiments, which might be a completely different thing to actual natural selection,
Yeah.
because it's consciously goal-oriented, which
Yeah.
evolution is not.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, does anyone have anything else they want to add?
Does Randol want to say something about the purity of the races, given the previous discussion? Or
No.
okay.
Okay. James, do you want to have any more German
No.
jokes?
The only
Do you want to then follow that up with Jewish jokes? And then just
no, I like
He's
Jewish
actually been
people.
really good this time, hasn't he?
I
He's
really
been-
like Jewish
Curtis,
people.
stop
should-
picking on our token minority.
Yeah, I'm sorry, James. I realized that we hired you based upon certain quotas that we needed to have, and I'm really, really happy that this whole working relationship is, pleasant and amicable. Anyway,
Right.
I've been Curt,
Randall.
Amanda.
Token minority.
signing off. That was fun. I'm sorry. Do you want to do that over again?
I don't know.
I think I think it was great. I think we.
I don't know how great it was, but
Oh.
it's okay.
I'm
We'll
sorry.
make you a cake.
I would say, did we? I didn't mean to actually insult you.
Mm.
Okay.
Here's the thing. I make lots of Jewish jokes. I really like Jewish people. I assume that you guys tolerate me, so...
We do.
James, you feel the token
That's just
minority.
that's just
Amanda
mean.
feels the,
This is it. Amanda's
I'm not-
really mean to me, but it's okay.
No, that wasn't what I meant.